All right, we'll see if anyone comes into the live. But what we're doing right now is we are working on a commission for the first appearance of Ben Grimm, Thing figure. So we're going from FF number 1, way back in late 1961, which pretty much launched the Marvel Age. What I'm looking at is basically Ben after he mutated at the end of the issue after being bombarded with cosmic rays. And wound up mutating into his first incarnation of the Thing, which was a slightly less rocky, defined version of the Thing himself. So we're going lumpy, but we're not going rocky. We're also trying to smooth out the underpants area, which we're going to extend up into underneath of the second set of abs. So we're going to pretty much cover from here at this joint down into the underwear area. And then I say underwear area because having read Fantastic Four #1, he rips right through his astronaut spacesuit and is standing there in what appears to be like a maroonish brown color underwear. So we're going to be doing some stuff here. It's going to be difficult. I have to smooth out all of the rock detail in like the feet, the hands, and then smooth into the chest to make it more lumpy. Way less defined than it is right now. I'm using Aves epoxy sculpt. I'm using orange mixed with gray. And I'm trying to get this to work the best that we possibly can as far as definition goes. I'm doing tiny little pieces at a time, and I'm using wet hands into the sculpt. So we're removing detail, essentially, from the sculpt itself by making patches throughout. And then we're going to sand and make it look good, even. We'll try to remain as true as we possibly can to the Kirby art in the first book, which is difficult because Kirby's art, for being the greatest, was very inconsistent in early 1960s. A customer who commissioned this and I were just talking about how inconsistent he was on scale and sizes in the early 60s. So it's something I'm battling right now while I'm making this, because I'm trying to make this giant monster bigger than the other versions of the Thing. I'm not trying to make it anything that we haven't seen before. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm pretty much removing detail, but adding just a little bit of extra sculpt work and smoothing it with my fingers. I'm going to have to sand and add some detail work in here too, and then it's going to get painted, primed and then painted. But we're just making this real pretty much smooth right now. And then you see some of the lumpy bits that are there, little rocks and a little bit of definition here and there. So and we're going to build up on the sculpt as we go. So you can see I'm kind of just continue to wet my hands. And that's so I can move the sculpt. It is not an abomination base. It is a rhino chest with Ulick arms and legs, as well as thing head, hands, and feet. So I've done most of the engineering portion of this thing as far as getting everything to attach. And I was just building up the neck, where I'm still working on building the neck from the traps and into the neck to basically make this head support. The main thing I wanted to do in this tonight was attach the head and get it to sit correctly in the sculpt where I wanted it to sit. And then start building up the chest area to make it look like it's supposed to. Yep, the ab crunch, I wanted to pick the rhino body because he's bigger than the regular thing, but also because I want him to be able to kind of look down and be like this lumbering giant thing that kind of hunches over like the monster he was supposed to be in Fantastic Four #1. You kind of see it in a couple scenes in early Fantastic Four issues where he's basically just crashing through windows and breaking stuff because he's just gigantic. And that's something eventually they got away from, but since we're trying to stay true to the original art, the original concept here, and my customer is a little bit of a historian as far as the character goes, and me having read comics my whole life, I'm doing the same thing. I am trying to stay true to the Kirby version of the character from the early days of FF. Keep him big, keep him bulky, but make him lumpy. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think he does look pretty decent so far. This sculpting is kind of the reverse of normal sculpting, which is why I wanted to do the video. I wanted to show people how you can actually remove detailing with epoxy sculpt versus adding the detailing. You're usually building up the sculpt and adding more and more material and then sculpting detail. I'm trying to take detail out of this figure. And I'm going to put a little bit more back in with these lumps. If you guys have questions, feel free to just ask in the chat and I'll respond as we go. I really don't have a free hand to type back, but I'll answer if I see it as we're going live. If I don't see it for some reason, I apologize. I'm not trying to ignore you, I'm just trying to pay attention to the sculpting. So we just build up his left pec a little bit, make it a little bit more defined versus the rhino one where the sculpt on the rhino is just odd. He looks like the way this neck piece attaches in this figure, it just sits weird. So we're going to build up a little bit more on the pec and make it look a little bit more defined at the top of the upper pec. And then smooth down into, as we go down into the chest. The most challenging thing about making a thing custom. I've done other things before. Yeah, nothing in particular that makes it more difficult than other figures, except that there's a ton of detail that goes into the thing due to his appearance. But most characters that you work on, regardless of who they are, you're going to put that much detail in it. It's just going to be different. So like, if I'm working on a rogue, I mean, I'm not aiming to make like monster rogue. I'm aiming to make, J. Scott Campbell version of rogue where, it depends on what the customer wants. But I'm aiming for, that stylized Campbell version. It's that cheesecake pinup art type stuff there. Where the thing I'm going for a monster, which is kind of why I made that first spiky thing, years ago. No one had the guts to make that thing, and I kept trying to get somebody to do it because I wanted to see it myself. I wanted to see them put one out, and they haven't done one yet. So I'm like, if the company's not making one, like somebody needs to do this. It's too cool of a design left over from the '90s to do it. So the spikes were tedious. They're not difficult. The detail work is more of a pain. When I say the detail work, I'm talking about like if I'm sculpting, the individual rocks, and then coming up with a design that looks like it's true to the comic. With the Lumpy thing, I don't have to worry about looking at reference. That thing is embedded in my head since I was a kid, and I read a reprint of FF1. I don't have to look at anything to be able to remember what this thing's supposed to look like. He's supposed to look like lumpy oatmeal, and smoother than rocky. So there's really nothing really hard about it. Like everything else, I mean, practice makes perfect. So to me, this is kind of just how it should look. And it's really just about, it's about getting my fingers to cooperate with my brain. It's all just like motor skill memory, muscle memory stuff. So I'm trying to get out what I think this should look like in my brain, in my head, and make it look like it's supposed to in a 2D form. So, I mean, like the chest is pretty good right now. I got a little bit more work to do on this left pec. And I could probably go a little bit under and like go for the lower pec to make it look a little bit more full. Make him look more of a powerhouse. Yes, there's really nothing that's difficult per se. It's more about, does it capture the look that I want? Because I'm using a direct reference. I'm using something that's existing, that's somebody else's art. And when we're not talking about just somebody else, we're talking about Jack Kirby, the King art. Like, I don't want to screw that up. I want to do it justice in a 3D form. I can't draw well, I should say. I can draw, but I can't draw well. So that said, I kind of gravitated towards sculpting and painting in my teens. And it was all about trying to do what the guys like that are doing in comics. Like I want to trace, if I'm doing a Todd McFarlane Spider-Man, I want it to look like Todd McFarlane's art. If I'm doing this figure, I want it to look like Kirby. If I'm doing a Miller Daredevil, you know, so on, so on. It's the matter of making it all look right in the end. And the hard part with this is not going overboard. If I add too much sculpt, then I'm going to have to remove some. I still have to build up. I still have to build up with the sculpt and make these lumpy parts. That's why I'm not too worried right now when I have, you know, uneven pecs. Like if this were like a Conan figure or something like that, this would be way more symmetrical, and I'd be spending way more time, you know, making sure everything was dead on. Because I'm looking at, you know, like an Arnold physique, like Mr. Olympia Arnold back then, early 80s Arnold, like everything was super symmetrical as far as anatomy. On this, I'm winging it because, if you, again, let's go back to the anatomy of FF1. He's a monster. That's what I'm dealing with here, right? And that looks pretty good so far for the first layer on the chest piece itself. So what I'm going to start doing is start working on the hands a little bit. And this is a little bit more difficult. The cool thing is, like, okay, that's pretty smooth, so that's nice. But I'm trying to tamp down all of these smooth these rocky pieces now on the fingers. And in the sculpt, without destroying the detail of the sculpt itself. So you can see I just kind of did that with the small finger. I smoothed it out, but I didn't lose the shape. The hard part of this is I'm working with wet sculpt here. And because I'm working with wet sculpt, I'm trying not to damage the section that I just sculpted. Because if I smooth it and it's all good in that area, and then I touch it, it's going to get all screwed up. And if you can't see me, I'm doing it off camera. I keep wetting my hands because I'm working with smooth sections here. And this is kind of a technique I learned recently from other sculptors. And I'm not actually really using like conventional sculpting techniques from people who make custom figures. I'm actually part of a sculpting forum now. And I'm getting ideas from these guys that are sculpting in other materials. That like conventional clay and Hollywood special effects type stuff versus the stuff we use on action figures. I truly do believe this is art, and I'm trying to create art, and for me to do that, I kind of try to stay up with trends and figure out what works, what doesn't work, and what's going to look good on a figure and what's not. So right now, because I don't need them, I'll pull these arms off because I want to get into this torso a little bit more. And when we're working in here, I'm actually going to sand in here a little bit on both sides, and that'll enable me to work better in that area, and it won't, when I paint this thing and I move these arms up, it won't rub all the paint and the sculpt off at that point. Right now, if I were to just paint it, it would be all screwed up completely. So I'm working right now. We back him up. I'm working on the pants now. So what I'm trying to do here on the pants area is I'm trying to make the pants go up higher. And have a joint in here where the waist is. So the pants are on the top part and the lower part of the pants. Of the sculpt, I'm sorry. So that way it looks good. More uniform, more flushed out. And then on top of that, it just looks better aesthetically to be more of a full thing. And again, this sculpt, this design that Kirby did was just so bizarre. I mean, like, he's like, basically the thing is like wearing like tighty whities underneath of his astronaut suit, right? And we've all seen that image after he rips through, and the area where, the scene where he's breaking through a window after he knocks his trench coat off, and I guess the tailor shop or something in FF1 or FF2, I can't remember which one that was. So I'm doing that. I'm trying to recreate that the best I can. And it's weird looking at that design. I was like looking at it today, and it's like Kirby almost made like a diaper. It doesn't even look like underwear. There's like no fly. There's no nothing. It doesn't even look like wrestling trunks or anything, or like strongman suit from like that they used for like Batman or Superman back in the 30s when they were created. It straight looks like a diaper, and it's bizarre. But hey, he's the king. Who might argue with it? I'm just trying to make his art look as good as possible in this 3D form. And again, like I said, customer is a Ben Grimm historian and obsessed with the character. I'm trying to do right by him. He's a repeat customer, and I'm trying to make it trying to make him happy with the concept that he had for this figure. All I got told was make the first appearance, and that's what I'm doing, whichever way I need to get it done. We're going to clean all that up. Make sure everything attaches well. And it doesn't interfere with the swivel of the waist itself. And we might need to build more up on this again. But we'll get there when we get there. So I'm taking a X-Acto knife in here now to make sure that I didn't sculpt too deep. And none of the sculpt is going to interfere inside the waist. So I'm basically just clearing it. And again, yeah, it's kind of weird and unconventional, but again, works for me. Might not work for somebody else. I do use the X-Acto knife in sculpting sometimes. Most people are using straight up conventional tools for sculpting, and I do too. But sometimes I like using the edge of a blade because I feel like I have more control with that because I'm used to using that for cutting and other stuff. So this is going to definitely need some more build up and sanding. But again, this is just base day one sculpts. So I'm going to sand here. We've built up a bunch, but we're gonna need to build more later. I'm gonna start working on the back a little bit. I got this big blob of sculpt that I need to work with before it hardens. I want to get as much of it done as possible. And I'm going to keep doing these sections one at a time. If you guys are watching later after this video goes live, I wasn't talking to myself. There were people asking questions that are probably down in the comment section below. I was answering their questions about how to make this thing and what's difficult about this and what's not. All right, we're going off for the night.